Francine is going to take us on this journey, where it's been and where it's going.
They had a little stage stop store here, and this is where they settled. It was called Fulton Wells at the time.
Hathaway Ranch Museum is the place for me. Come on, Francine. Farm living is the life for me. Speaking of farm life, the Hathaway Ranch Museum was actually a working farm at one time.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is some of the equipment, the later equipment that was used in the farming process.
That's correct.
And as I understand it, we have a treat waiting for us outside to see all kinds of different types of equipment, some of which you actually used to use yourself.
Well, I used this tractor.
This one right here.
This tractor to cut some hay on the neighbor's fields and rake it and haul it in to feed my horse.
Nice, nice. And prior to all the tractors, it was all horse-drawn stuff, wasn't it?
It was horse-drawn up into the late 30s, 1930s.
Ah, and then we get to see some tractors that your father used, and that was the workhorse of the tractors, wasn't it?
Yes, he put a lot of miles on his little 30 Caterpillar
Nice.
tractor.
Well, what do you say we go race out into the back right now?
Sounds good.
All right. So look at all these tines right here.
That's for picking up the hay that's laying on the ground that's been cut earlier.
Okay, so we cut it, it lays down.
Let it dry.
How tall was the hay or the oats or whatever?
Probably not over 3 to 3.5 feet.
Okay, all right.
And
so
it's laying all over the ground, and so this is used to rake it into rows.
Okay, so you would pull your tractor straight and then stop it.
Well,
Turn your tractor
that
around?
remember to trip the rope that's here.
Oh.
The rake would be down to catch the grass, the hay, and then you trip the rope and dump it, and then you start again and you make it into rows so that you could come back and pick up the rows or take a baler down if you're baling.
So the end of this was actually touching the ground?
That would go down onto the ground
Okay.
and pick up the loose hay that had been mowed and was laying all over the ground. It had to dry for a day or two depending upon the weather.
Okay.
And then you rake it into rows so that you could pick up the rows. But this hay rake was the earlier, more primitive way of raking the hay into rows.
Okay, now speaking of primitive, we have a giganormous one over there, and you called it something, and I don't remember what it was called.
A bull rake.
Okay, so you would have a bull pull that one?
No, I think big horses pulled it. I think it's called a bull rake because it was so big.
Ah, okay.
I mean, I've never heard anything but it called a bull rake.
All right, so we have 2 bull rakes over there, and then we have the Francine-sized ones over here.
The smaller, more
little bit
practical,
smaller,
more usable.
Okay,
size.
so this whole property, let's take a walk over here. This whole property here actually used to be farmland, right?
It started
off.
Orchards that became farmland.
Okay, orchards first. What did they grow first?
Well, there were walnut trees scattered in this area.
And we actually still have one of the original ones here.
Yes.
Nice. Okay, so we had the walnuts. Anything else?
Well, they started growing grain when they took some of the orchards out. They were growing corn and then grain for the feedlot animals. When they went into business, they built a feedlot on the property. It was the first feedlot, I've been told, in the 17 western states.
Wow.
It became a prototype for people that went in the business of building feedlots across the plain states.
Now we're coming across to some machines over here that look like they've got these tines on them as well.
Well, these are called hay rakes, but called a windrower.
Oh.
Because it's set up to work at an angle, and so you could pull it back and forth in the field of the cut hay, and it would put it into rows without having to use the trip lever and switch back and forth. It was a faster, more efficient way to put up hay.
So this, even though it's an antique, is more modern than the one that we saw over there.
Yes, and the same with this one.
Look at this
more
one.
Modern.
Now, you look at how beefy all this metalwork is on here. You have to have some pretty beefy equipment. And I understand that we're going to go see a tractor right now that your father would have used on something like this, right?
I don't know whether he used it on this, but he may have.
All right, well, let's go see what that looks like.
This might have been used for alfalfa hay, which might have been more dense to harvest than oat hay.
So is this one of the original orange trees?
Yes.
Oh, I'm gonna have to snag one of them and get some orange juice. Hey, this has got to be his tractor he used all the time, right?
No.
No? All right, so it has to be this one then.
No.
What? All right, this has got to be it.
This was his old hand crank that he put countless miles on this one.
Is that
He
right?
prepared the soil by disking it and planting and then harvesting with the combine that's down the lane.
Okay, so I didn't notice a key inside of there when I checked earlier. So-
This is a hand crank.
The hand crank.
Tough start.
I would imagine, and if I'm not mistaken, I mean, I remember when lawnmowers had to be they had their own little rope that you used, and you'd try to pull that thing just with the lawnmower, and that's just one piston. You got a big old monster of a tractor here.
Well, I don't know whether this started a small engine that started a big engine or not, because some hand cranks, I think, work that way.
I understand those things would have a kickback on them. You could break an arm or a leg.
I have heard those stories.
Yeah. So what really catches my eye about this one, and I think your father was pretty forward thinking, is the fact that unlike this that had rubber wheels, this has got a track on here.
Yes.
That's very unusual, isn't it?
I think it's referred to as a clee track.
Yeah, for without any rubber on there.
No fenders.
No fenders.
No protection.
Okay, now, which brings me to my next part, because you have a very fond memory of how you got the help, didn't you?
I got to sit as a small child on that toolbox and keep my feet off the tracks as it rolled underneath it.
How many toes did you lose?
I was one of the children. I think my sister and my brother may have ridden with me.
So back in those days, a parent today would never allow their children to do something like this. But in the world of farming, you were exposed to things that kids aren't exposed to today. And one of the things that you do over here at the Hathaway Ranch Museum is to expose people to the fact that these things were used at one time. It was a fact. It was a reality of life. And this is how farming actually and ranching actually happened.
Yes.
With these type of things, all the way from the horse-drawn and how it moved all the way up to here. And how fortunate were you to be a part and actually see all that?
It was a special growing up time that we weren't aware was as special as it was.
Very nice. Well, I know that we have more to see. I know that we have more to visit. I know that we have more to explore. And with that, you could actually make your way down here to the Hathaway Ranch Museum and check us out on the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you.